Hello, my name is Ilham. My metric number is 268954. So in this video, I'll be presenting about my Lab 1 project. So for the Lab 1, we're basically required to make an imitation of this website, especially this ABSI-Calculator. We need to translate it into the Flutter app. So this is the Flutter app that I came up with. So for the design, for the first section, I created the section for showing results, and this one, second section, is for input. So for the source code, I have several files on the screen here. So I'll start explaining from this ABSI-Calc. So this ABSI-Calc class is basically where the calculation happens, and I added this change nullifier because I used the provider state management. And for this one, these are just a bunch of variables for holding some values. So I'll start from the most important methods. So I have calculate ABSI method. So basically I had this convert to this method just convert centimeters to meter, since this input uses the centimeter and kilogram. So for the calculate ABSI, I need BMI result. So I created a separate method for this one to only calculate the BMI, and this is basically the formula. And then for the ABSI result, I save the result to the ABSI variable here, and I have notify listeners to basically notify all changes to listeners. And down here I have calculate ABSI score. So before doing the calculation for the ABSI score, I have to call this get ABSI data. If we go to see the method, it's just basically retrieves the ABSImean and ABSISD. Now this one is quite interesting because to get the ABSIZ value is a bit difficult, because I have to retrieve the data for specific gender and then age as well, because each age can have different ABSImean or an ABSISD. For example, this one for the age of 2, it has different ABSImean than the age of 3. And for the type of this data is basically a list of map that has a string as a key and dynamic as a value. And if we go down here, I have these getters. Now going back to this ABSI-Calc class. So now for this code, this just basically tries to match the gender that we are choosing for in the input or in the drop down. And if we choose male, then the data that will be used will be the data male, and after that it's going to loop for each element, and it's gonna compare for the age of the input, and if it matches with the data, then it's gonna retrieve the ABSImean and ABSISD. So to retrieve the map, I do something like this. I put the key here instead of the brackets, and the reason why I do this, because if we look at this, the values, it has like a nested map. So by doing like this, I'm able to get the ABSImean. Now for the interpretation, I have the method for it. So it just, and all of this information are basically available on the website itself. And yeah, it just compares the ABSIZ and the comparison and the comparison value. So going back to the main.dart file, so for this user interface, I have 4 controllers for text editing, and for this one up here I have changed the wire provider because this will provide the or notify any changes that is set to ABSI class. And down here I have the single child scroll view to make it scrollable basically. And inside of this container up here I have the column. Now for the column, I basically set the alignment to center, so as you can see here it's centered. And inside of this container I have the column, since this one is placed, these widgets are placed vertically. And yeah, this is just the design, the style. And this one I have consumer. Basically this is where I need the data, because this is where I will show the results of the calculation. So for this one, ABSI is going to get the ABSI getter here. Basically it's just gonna retrieve the ABSI calculation and the ABSIZ, and then this one is for the interpretation down here. So the reason why I choose consumer, because I don't want to rebuild the widget tree, I mean the whole thing here, to only show this data. Now moving down here, so I have the second container here. So this is the style of it. I have the border radius to make a the corner bit like curved, and inside of this container I have column here, and then now I have this label input. So this label input is basically the method that creates basically a layout for this. So if you can see here, the layout is consistent because I use this label input that I created. If you look at this method down here, it just basically a simple one. It receives title and any widget. So for this one, just gonna lay things out here. And for the reason why I did that, because I don't want to rewrite that many times, because if you can see here, I need to lay things out consistently for many times, like 1 2 3 4 5 times. Now for the drop down here, I basically create a sex drop down in a separate file. If we go here, it's in sex dropdown.dat file. So this is the stateful widget, and for this one, widget is basically it's able to uh, to pop up some values to choose. And whenever, the reason why I separate it out is because I want to be able to only use set state here, so it's just gonna build this it's gonna basically update only this widgets. So because if I put like on the main dot, I'm afraid it's going to build the whole thing for just no reason. And this one I have the set state to update the value, and down here I have the provider, because the reason why I put here, because I want to be able to change the calculation based on the gender, because if we saw earlier that each gender can have like a unique value. So basically if I click one of the gender, it's going to recalculate and it's going to show the snack bar. And this one for the second level input, this is just showing the label and the input, which is the text field. And for the styling, this is the style for it, and I have the suffix, because if we go here we can see the suffix of years here to indicate or to inform the user that this has to be an age value. And for the height, it's centimeter, and for the weight, kilogram, and then waist circumference, and it's centimeters, same. And finally we are in the elevated button here, which is so I have the consumer widget here that is set to ABSI-Calc, and so this is the styling. The reason why I put here, because whenever I want to be able to see the values whenever I tap this button, so it's going, the values, the calculation will be immediately reflected up here. So I have this a very simple validation to check whether the input is empty or not. If it's empty, it's going to show the snack bar, and otherwise it basically is gonna receive the values, the input values, and since I have the consumer, I set the data method here to pass some data, and then it's going to, I call the calculate ABSI method, calculate ABSI score, and make interpretation, so that it will calculate all three values here. And then if it's successful, it's going to say successfully calculated. Now it's time to demonstrate the app. So I'll just put some random values, but still reasonable. For example, if I put like 24, and if we calculate the result, if we click this button, it's gonna inform the successfulness of the calculation, and this is the value. But if I have this empty and I tap this button, it's gonna say please fill in the form properly. Now if I set it back to 20 something, 25, and I calculate. It says successfully calculated. Now let's compare these values using the original website here. So this one 25, the height is 186, and this one is 75, and this one 80. And if you see the value, yeah, it's basically the same thing. The ABSI is the same, or 754. The reason why I don't have this 5 up here, because I only set the maximum of decimal places to 4, so it's fixed only 4 decimal places. And then for the ABSISD score, if you look at this, X is basically the same, 0.8 minus 0.8332, and this is the same. And for the interpretation, it says low. This one is low. Now if we change to female, the ABSISD score is going to change. Now if we do the same thing to this app, the value changes too. Yeah, I think that's all for me. Thank you very much.